It's finally time to talk about the Illuvium airdrop. I'm going to go through just how much revenue I think you can generate from playing in the airdrop, some of my personal strategies approaching this thing, and exactly how you can compete to earn ILV tokens by playing video games. Play to earn is come back with a different name, play to airdrop, and it is back in full force. Illuvium is going to do one of the biggest airdrops in all of Web3 gaming, and I'm going to explain exactly how it works, exactly how much revenue I think you can generate, and everything in between. So firstly, let's go through the article that Illuvium has thankfully set up for us that helps illustrate all of the really key details before we jump into the spreadsheet. So firstly, they say that the main goal behind our private and open beta testnet phases is simple. We want your feedback on the gameplay and to test our systems before the official open beta starts. We want you to play as much as possible, hunt for bugs, and ensure everything's operating smoothly on testnet. To sweeten the deal and say thanks for your help, we've set aside ILV tokens for play to airdrop rewards with 10% reserved for the initial two phases, private beta 4 and open beta testnet. As we can see here, the pre-registration begins on April the 15th, then private beta 4 starts on the April the 30th, and the open beta testnet on May 28th. We can also see later on that later on in this article, it mentions that they expect open beta testnet to last 2 to 4 weeks. So it could come pretty much any time in June, or at least that's what the Illuvium team is expecting. They also mention in the pre-registration section that the group of players for the private testnet will be under 10,000. I actually expected it to be significantly less than that, so that's quite interesting. And I think many of the players that are already active in Illuvium will definitely get access to this. If you want to start playing now to try and get access to this private beta testnet, I don't want to say it's too late to do so. It's always good to get involved, especially if you're well known in different communities and you have a lot to say regarding the feedback to the Illuvium team. They're also going to iron out major kinks and ensure that there's a smooth ride heading into open beta. A big advantage here being that they can make sure that all of these smart contracts integrate with the game seamlessly and there's no crazy bugs. The last thing you want to happen on an open beta launch is every single time you capture an alluvial, it does not appear in your wallet. That would be really, really bad. Going through this thorough testing for about 2 months is going to really help with all of that. Open beta testnet 2 TBD, as we said, and 10% of the play to airdrop ILV pool for the test phases will be given out during this period. So it will be private access with not that many people and then a lot of people, but 10% is going to be given to all of them. I've got all that lined up in my spreadsheet as well. And then with play to airdrop, here is how it works. Qualifying for the airdrop is a breeze. The more you play, the more airdrop points you earn, which applies to all 3 games, so be prepared. Take advantage of the opportunity to grab your share of the ILV bounty over 6 months. To make this easier, we'll have a dashboard allowing you to track your accumulated points, which we expect to roll out as we get closer to open beta. If you've got a lot of time in your hands, this is the thing you want to get involved in. Okay. So how much do I think you're going to generate? Now, I want to talk about all of my different variables that I've set up here first. Okay. Here is what we know. Token quantity is probably going to be above 10% of the total in-game yield pool. Now, that is a guess, but I think it's safe to assume it would have to be above that number. My max limit here is 50%, which I personally think is absurd, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but let's say that that's the end cap. Early access testnet distribution. I'm going to have to assume that the open beta testnet is going to have a much larger portion of the ILV tokens given for it, because it has a lot more players in it. So in this case, I'm taking a very liberal view where I'm looking at 2% for the private beta testnet, and then 8% of that total 10% is going to be given to everyone else. Early access testnet timeframe is 1 month. The main testnet timeframe also 1 month. And the open beta season 1 timeframe is 5 months. It's over the course of 6 with your open beta testnet and your main season 1 of the game, and so that goes over 6 months. Tokens available in the pool. I wrote 950,000. I could not be bothered calculating how many have been distributed for things like Illuvium and all that sort of stuff. It's probably significantly more than that, closer to 990. but I made it really conservative. Current token price is $140. You guys don't know when I record this video. Let's assume that it's that when I'm recording it. I'm not going to be talking about price beyond that in this video. Early access testnet players guesstimate. I put 1,000. I'll change that in just a second to, let's say, 5,000. And the open beta testnet players guesstimate. So when everyone has access to the game, I'm going to leave that at 100K. That's kind of my target for that. But you know what? We know Shrapnel got about 50K on one of its better days. And so let's leave it at 50K at our base case for how many players are going to be playing this game. And I'll put it at 5K for the private testnet. And so what I've done here is I've looked at the tokens distributed, in this case 10%, for my base case. In my bull case, I've got 25%. And then in my ultra bull case, I've got 50%. We'll talk about that in a minute. So with tokens distributed, that's 10%. The daily break-even revenue required for the DAO to break even with the cost to the DAO is actually $63,000 every single day, which in the case of maybe 50,000 players, and that would be about $1 per player per day, which isn't too crazy. Early access testnet tokens are 2,000 tokens. Main testnet, about 7,500. And then the open beta season 1 tokens would be 85,500 tokens, giving us our total. And here are the calculations here. So the tokens distributed in the first day, every single day for the private testnet, 63, and then 250 and 570 for the others. That's every single day in total, not per person. Total revenue, and then the revenue per person would actually be $2 for the private beta testnet, 70 cents for the open beta testnet, since it doesn't really have that many, and then $1.60 every single day for the open beta full mainnet launch, which would actually be really awesome. That's really great for a lot of third world countries where they're really not earning that money. So really engaging with those communities is helpful here. The total revenue per person across the 6-month period would actually be about $300 per person. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about that. Personally, I think that's a lot of money for playing a video game. That being said, you got to grind kind of hard, and the top players will obviously earn significantly more because they got more points than everyone else. But as kind of like a base scenario, if you're getting just your dues, then you'll be earning $300 for doing basically nothing in a certain sense, or maybe half that, depending on how they distribute based on performance in the airdrop. But here's where it starts to get a lot more interesting. If we look at the bull case at 25% tokens distributed, they would need 150K every single day to break even. At 50,000 players, that would be $3 per person per day, which is starting to get a little bit harder to achieve since we don't know how many players are going to be playing Illuvium. Early access testnet tokens at about 5,000, 19,000 for main testnet, and then open beta at almost 250,000 tokens distributed. 1,600 tokens being distributed every single day. I apologize for that. Total revenue, 22, 88, and 220K. But here's the numbers you actually want to see. Revenue per person during the private testnet every single day, $4. Over the course of that testing period, $120, which is pretty good for a month's work of gaming. In the open beta testnet at $2. So significantly less, about less than half. And then for the open beta mainnet, looking at just over $4 again, meaning over the course of 6 months, you could earn about $850, probably closer to $2,000 if you perform extremely well. This is good for a lot of people. I don't know how else to put it. Very interesting stats here. And now we have a look at my case. That's wow, what, why? Because this would be ballsy on Illuvium's behalf. As we can see here, the tokens distributed at 50%. I just wanted to look at this for fun. I really don't think this is going to happen. It's probably going to be somewhere in between 10 to 20% in my opinion. But you can see the daily break-even revenue is $350,000, which is a lot of money. $7 per player per person at 50,000 players, which now that I've said that doesn't sound that bad. Doesn't sound that great either, but it is what it is. Distributing a total of almost 500,000 tokens. To put it in perspective, that's like 5% of the total supply of Illuvium, closer to 7% of the supply after you consider SILV2. Total revenue per day being distributed, 44,000 for the private testnet, 177,000 for the open testnet, and then 450K for the open beta. The revenue per person is really what you want to know though. For private and the open beta mainnet, you're looking at about $9 per person per day, which is very, very good. What's interesting here is this justifies you playing the game quite easily. Say a stage 1 run is $2 to $3. You would essentially be earning an airdrop to pay for doing 3 runs in the overworld every single day, which is really good and would really help a lot of people play if they're on the fence, depending on how the distribution works as well. Total revenue per person, however, would be $250 over the course of the private beta testnet, only $100 for the open beta testnet, and then 1.3K over the course of 1.3K for the open beta mainnet, with a total of $1,700 distributed to everyone who participates over these 6 months. Maybe a lot more for those who do really, really well on the point system and the leaderboards. Now, I might do a future video for this. Leave a comment if you want to see this, but I'm thinking of doing a video where I break this down by game. If we expect 33% of these tokens to go to Illuvium 0, Illuvium Arena, and then Illuvium Overworld, and then we can kind of break that up again. We can say if you're playing Illuvium 0 and you're, let's say, the top 10% gets 10% of all tokens, or 50% of all tokens, or whatever it might be, you can break it down like crazy. You can be like, okay, maybe you just like playing Illuvium 0, and so if you're a top Illuvium 0 player, you're going to be earning this much. Maybe you just like the overworld. If you're a top overworld player, you might be earning this much. Or maybe you have a really balanced approach and you're like a moderate player in all 3, and this is how much you might be earning, to kind of assess what the best way to approach this sort of thing would be, because the number of players changes significantly. Let's say Illuvium 0 has 1 million players, because it's a mobile game, it's simple, and lots of people can have easy access to it. But the arena is a lot more niche, and so it has maybe 5,000, 10,000 players at most. Then the overworld would sit somewhere in the middle. And so if you're a top arena player and the tokens are distributed evenly among the 3, then you would be earning significantly more than, say, a top overworld player or a top Illuvium 0 player, in which you wouldn't really be earning that much at all. And so if you want me to break down the 3 different scenarios, leave a comment down below, like the video. If it hits 100 likes, I'll definitely make that. That would be a lot of fun. But yes, have a good one.